What do we do with Tucker Carlson? Tucker Carlson has been in the news a lot lately. He is the person that, on both sides, whether you love Israel or hate Israel, he's the guy that people are zeroing in on. And Sam Harris gave a very vivid description of Tucker Carlson. I've almost said Tucker Carlson, but Tucker Carlson on Bill Maher's show. Sam Harris, he doesn't got a dog in this fight. He's not a Christian. He's an atheist, so he's outside the lines, and he can almost give a more objective opinion of what's going on with this whole Israel fiasco that's going on in Christian circles, the divide that's happening. And Tucker Carlson, he's the guy that's the oddball to me because he's not Roman Catholic. I can almost give a little more grace to Roman Catholics because that's their theology of them distancing themselves from Israel and Jews because they're the epitome of replacement theology. So Tucker Carlson not being that, he's where everybody, because he's got such a big megaphone, people are listening in on. So we're going to take a look at what Sam Harris had to say, which was very vivid in what he's coming at it, because he's asking Bill, did you see the shows with him going on Mike Huckabee and talking with him and also Nick Fuentes?
Tucker is he's a very interesting case because have you watched all these interviews? Did you watch the Nick Fuentes interview? And
I've never seen anything.
Did you
I just read the news.
Did you watch him with Huckabee? You didn't watch
Fuck
that?
no.
Okay.
But I read about it.
So the Huckabee...
I can read the quotes. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, so I don't know if this was brought out in any of the coverage, but the most fascinating thing about that interview from my point of view is that Tucker found in his just diehard commitment to attacking Israel, he found a kind of theology, which it may be well subscribed that I'm just not aware of, that puts significant daylight between him and evangelical Christianity, or what is generally considered, fundamentalist Christianity in America. He attacked Huckabee for defending the Old Testament in any way. So in the Old Testament, I think in Genesis 15, it says that the Jews should get the land between the Euphrates and the Nile, which is like everything in the Middle East, right? And so Tucker said to Huckabee, "You mean to tell me you'd be okay with Israel conquering Lebanon and Syria and Iraq and
part of Egypt?"
Yeah, and Huckabee is like, "Well, they're not intending to do that now." And he said, "Yeah, but if they did it, would it be okay?" And Huckabee said, "Well, yeah, it's in the Bible." And so just hung himself on the Bible. But Tucker knew he had to do that.
Right.
He knew he couldn't say, "Oh yeah, the Old Testament's bullshit," right? But Tucker was really saying the Old Testament's bullshit. I'm a believing Christian.
Right.
I'm just as much of a Bible thumper as you.
Right.
But my theology is different. My theology is pure New Testament. The Old Testament, it's got genocide in it. It's just insanity. Kill the Amalekites. That's barbarism. This is just, but it's from that frame that he can say, I got nothing in common with the Jews. The Jews just killed Christ. To leave aside the fact that Jesus was Jewish and the Virgin Mary was Jewish, all the apostles were Jewish, leave that aside. The Jews are just, hummus-eating Christ killers, and maybe they killed Charlie Kirk. And but it was amazing. It was either amazingly cynical or I don't know if it was heartfelt. But what was fascinating to me is that he knows his audience. He's got an audience that is ready to say, "Fuck the Old Testament," right? And fuck you, Mike Huckabee, and fuck all you evangelicals who care about the Old Testament and Israel. We don't like any of this. It's all Christ is king, and that's all we need to say. And it's America first.
All right, so there's a lot there to unpack. That's what's going on. That is why Tucker seems so different, because you got the evangelicals on one side, you got Roman Catholics on the other, and evangelicals more stand with Israel. I know that it's not white and black or whatever, this stark of a contrast, because there's a little bleed over, and Roman Catholics, there's people in there that love Israel and all that. But Tucker is kind of like in the middle of all this, and he's just voicing this opinion, which is pretty much just a Marcionite heresy. If you're familiar with Marcion, he was a heretic that was deemed a heretic, way back when, early on in the Christian church, which he did not want anything to do with anything of the Jewish God. This is the same thing that's over and over that we see that a lot of Christians are trying to make sense of, because when you go through the Old Testament, you just see Israel, these promises to Israel, and my love for Israel, talking about God. He just has an everlasting love for Israel, and it's all about the Jews and all that. And it just doesn't really jive with our Christian theology today. Our Christian theology today is there's the church, and that's what it is. So we're like kind of hijacking all those promises, that kind of love description of Israel, and just putting us in that place and saying, well, really, God's talking about the future church that is going to come. So Tucker is kind of reviving and making alive this same heresy that wants to cut out everything of the Jewish God. Because that Marcionite guy, he had cut like even in the New Testament, anything that referred kind of to the Jews or the God of Israel, he had to just like with a razor blade cut it out off the papyri or whatever, and only deal with Jesus Christ. But then you're just like, do you understand? You're missing the whole point. You're not even seeing who Jesus really is when you do that. You're chopping the tree down and you're sitting on a branch and you're thinking you're not going to fall. You're just in midair, just planted on a branch, and you think that there's no foundation. When you cut the foundation out from under you, what are you resting on? And this is I just would almost like to see a Bible study of Tucker Carlson going through the Bible in general. I mean, the Old Testament, the New Testament, and how he's interpreting it, how he's kind of revamping it, creating it in his own image, making it like, because a lot of people do this. I think it's just this arrogance that we have, that we don't want to submit to this God of Israel that has promises and connection with Jewish people, with the people of Israel. It doesn't, because it's like, if he loves them, that means he can't love me as much. I'm going to take a little bit of a step back and think, if we just look at Jesus himself, what did he say? Jesus didn't have much contact with Gentiles when he was on earth. There was at times when he did run across Gentiles, but most of his audience was Jewish people. And a very vivid picture of a Gentile coming up to him was the Syrophoenician woman. And she's pleading with him to do a miracle for her. And what does he say to you? Or what does he say to the woman? He says, "It is not proper for me to give the children's bread to dogs." He calls the Gentile a dog. You know, and I this can rub Gentiles the wrong way. Like, how could Jesus have like almost seemed racist? How could he have been a person that has almost a more of a love for Jewish people? First of all, he's a Jew. His family, his like bloodline is with the Jewish people. But there is more going on there, and there is. But his main missions when Jesus was on earth, his main mission, his only mission on earth when he was here, was for the Jewish people. He didn't go at all to the Gentiles. It wasn't until he was resurrected, and this is what probably caught the apostles so off guard, because they're like, our only mission is for the Jewish people and for everybody that wants to be a part of this whole thing to become Jewish so that they can share in the promises of Israel. It wasn't until Jesus was resurrected that he changed their mind and he said, go to the nations. My people have rejected me, obviously, because they sent me to the cross. Now go to the nations. The promise is let's bring as many people into this wedding banquet as possible. Go to the highways, the byways, ask anybody, because my primary audience, my primary people who I came for rejected me. It's not to say that they're completely done away with, but there is a time right now, a gap in history that God is opening up the doors to anyone, whoever wants in. And that's kind of what's going on. And a lot of Christians don't see this. And Tucker Carlson doesn't understand this as well. And I think there is a demonic, anti-Semitic, whatever, Jew hatred spirit that is always in this world, ever present in this world, that wants to kill Jews and wants to destroy the Jewish people. And it just subtly just whispers into Christians, into their heads, you know, the Jews did it. The Jews are evil. They're Christ killers, and almost makes them. And we saw that with even Martin Luther. Like, even in his life, he had the problem. He wrote the book like The Problem with the Jews or something like that, or the Jews and their lies. It very easily just sneaks into our Christian vibe and our Christian ideas, because and I think it is this jealous spirit, and it's satanic. Satan wants to kill those people because God has a natural covenant with them. He made a covenant with them. Even the new covenant itself is made with the Jewish people. It's just that Gentiles get to share a part of it, because there's also prophecies in the Old Testament that God would rescue people from all nations. And this is what the apostles had to go through in understanding, well, how is God going to rescue people from all nations? If everybody has to become Jewish? And this is what's going on in the New Testament. He's saying Gentiles remain Gentiles, Jews remain Jews. That's the whole issue in the book of Galatians. It's not that Judaizers are trying to make people do the 10 Commandments and live out God's law. No, it's these Judaizers are people that are trying to live on cheap grace and say, you don't have to trust in Jesus. I mean, that's part of it. But really, the main thing is become Jewish. And it's this cheap grace of if you become Jewish, you're set, you're good. You don't need to do anything else. Jesus, that's like icing on the cake. Really, it's just become Jewish, and it's this cheap grace theology. That's what's going on. And a lot of Christians miss this whole point because they think, well, why is Paul so vehement against Gentiles doing everything that is prescribed? Because those things that are prescriptions to Jews are not prescriptions to Gentiles. They can do it if they want, but they are not commanded. That's why Paul says in the book of Galatians, if you undergo circumcision, which is to say, if you become Jewish, you have to uphold the whole law. The whole yoke of the law is on you because the whole yoke of the law is on Jews. They have to keep it. It's their covenant. Gentiles are not commanded all those things. And that's the nuance, what is happening. And that's what Tucker Carlson is he's the guy that I don't think he understands it intensely. I don't think he grasps it. He's got a big megaphone. He's got a big voice. And I'm so happy he's a Christian, but Christians are under attack because Satan wants to undermine the Jewish people at all costs. And he wants to even use misguided Gentile Christians to do it. So that is what's going on. And I love how Sam Harris just brought this to light because he is the bystander who just can give an objective opinion because he doesn't have a dog in this fight. He's not a Christian. And he's seeing it. And he just, in this video with Bill Maher, which was very good. I was so happy that they talked about this. Obviously we want Bill and Sam Harris to see the light as well, but that's kind of what's going on. I wanted to share all that. Let me know what you think. If you are riding with Tucker, if you are buying into what he is promoting, what he is propagating, if you are buying into that, be aware. Or is it beware or be aware? I don't know. I think beware. Beware because there's this satanic anti-Semitic spirit that wants to kill the Jews, wants to destroy the Jews. And that is what's driving a lot of these things. The people, they can't stand it. And I've seen this a lot in my life. I've never really understood it myself because Jesus is Jewish. The apostles are Jewish. Every person that wrote every book in the Bible is Jewish. You could say Luke, the physician, wasn't, but I subscribe more to that he was probably a proselyte. But he might have been a Gentile that wrote, I don't know. But either way, pretty much 99% of the writers, that's their heritage. And we Gentiles get to share part of it. All right, we'll leave it at that. Smash that like button, drop a comment. Let me know what you think of the show. Let me know what you think about all of this, what's going on, because there is something in the air. All right, have a great day, everyone.